Well, the Sharks had a great start to the week, but it was followed by some pretty flat performances. We'll tear into last week's games. Also, Vlasic played his 1300th game in this past week, so we're going to look into what his time in San Jose meant to the organization and to the fans. Also, Georgiev has been turning it around since becoming a San Jose Shark, and mostly in about the last week and a half or so. So we're going to see if the Sharks can actually flip him at the trade deadline for anything good. We'll also take a look at how the Barracuda did in their only game this week, and we'll predict how the Sharks will fare in the next upcoming week in the scheduled win-loss segment. So let's get into it. Welcome. It is episode 14 of the Teal Teardown Hockey Podcast, and I want to thank you for listening wherever you are and whatever you're listening from. I just want to let you know that I appreciate you joining me here today. Well, the Sharks have had a roller coaster week. It started off very well. It looked like they were just on the other side of the 3-game losing streak and things were on the up. They managed to score 6 goals against Detroit. You thought maybe the Sharks had maybe some kind of a scoring touch that they kind of figured out for the rest of the season. Unfortunately, that was not the case because they followed it up by 2 awfully flat performances against Columbus and New York. Now, this whole week, 3 of these teams were beatable. I know the Detroit Red Wings and the Columbus Blue Jackets were coming off hot streaks. They were kind of turning their seasons around. But the Sharks were capable of obviously upsetting them both because obviously the Sharks stopped the Detroit Red Wings 7-game win streak. They actually killed it in its tracks. McLendon's new coach. We're obviously going to tear into this stuff later in more detail. But just the disappointment of the fact that the Sharks were capable and these performances later in the week were just awfully flat. Like, I would say in the game against Columbus, all 6 defensemen stunk. Not one of them made any great plays. They all made awful giveaways. All 6 of them just were terrible. And you can say the same thing about the Islanders, except it was more of an all-around team performance that was awful. I would say the only constant in that all 3 of those games was Georgiev. Surprisingly, is the way he started as a Shark, he was kind of rocky a bit, but since then, like, he's been, especially the last couple of weeks, he has actually been super solid for the Sharks. He's kind of turned his career around in a way because of how he's been seen as the Forgiev nickname, letting in 4 goals in a game on average is what people kind of joke about. So he's been 180 from that kind of guy. He's been solid against everybody else, confident in the net too. The way he stands up, he'll take like risky plays. He'll challenge a lot of shooters, and hasn't really been beaten that badly. I would say a lot of it was more just team performance overall. But yeah, the Sharks just been very disappointing. They really got to figure out their scoring flair, their scoring touch. Everybody seems to be cold. Even Celebrini, who's been kind of like the flashpoint of the whole season. He's been kind of cold lately. He's not been the same. He still has that dynamic ability that you've seen from him. It's just that he's not finishing it that much. Like, we're getting like spots of that stuff here and there, flares of like his game. He's still great defensively, but it's just not as magical as it's been lately. We've had some great goals here and there, but overall since the Detroit game, it hasn't been that great for the whole team perspective, like I said. So taking a look at the standings here, the Chicago Blackhawks are actually dead last in the league. The San Jose Sharks are second from last, but this is all in terms of points. San Jose has 34 points. Chicago has 33, but Chicago has 2 games in hand. So they played 46 games. San Jose's played 48. So technically the Sharks are dead last in terms of points percentage with .354%. So the downside is the Sharks, we're kind of hoping to see maybe them grow a little bit, at least improve in terms of the standings, but it looks like they're another bottom feeding team. There's no question about that now. So the positive side is the fact that the Sharks are a lottery team and they're in the hunt for James Hagens, and he's been the stud since the beginning of the season that everyone's looking forward to. Another Boston College kid that would be pretty nice for the Sharks to get. I don't want to get too far ahead in terms of this because there's still a third of the season left, a little bit more than that left, but they're in the conversation for him. And I hear a lot of people talking about Matthew Schaefer as kind of like the second place chip, if you will. He's a big right-handed defenseman who's playing for the Erie Otters this year in the OHL. He's having a good season. So either way, the Sharks could get one of these 2 guys, which they're kind of already deep in terms of prospects. So Sharks have a lot of good centers in terms of already, they have obviously Celebrini and Smith in the works. Beastet's out there. There's a lot of these guys already, but Hagens would just be another beneficial guy. If you remember the Sharks 10, maybe 15 years ago now, when they were at their peak, they were loaded with center depth to the point where they had maybe a few wingers. You could just shuffle any center around in the wing, in the center. That was one positive they had back in the day. They had Pavelski, they had Thornton, Marlowe, Greer was a center at the time. And you could shuffle these guys around anywhere you needed to. Couture was in the pipeline as well. I'm trying to think of all these guys that were just considered center. And this was back when they had centers that were specialized in like faceoffs, like Scott Nickel, Malholtra. Like the Sharks were so deep in terms of that they didn't have spots, all 4 spots available. They had to have people in the wing. So that was always a benefit to have. So you can never have too many centers is my point. So getting James Hagens, Will Smith, Bstedt, Celebrini, that would only help the Sharks anyway, so I wouldn't be against getting Hagens. I wouldn't say, hey, don't draft him. Always got to draft the best available player. But this Schaefer kid, too, is looking very good. So, as well as the Sharks having so many good kids on their prospect pool right now, you can never have too many defensemen because, A, you don't know how they're all going to pan out. Like, we know Cagnoli to be good. We're hoping that Polkamp becomes that offensive defenseman stud. Dickinson's obviously probably their best prospect right now that's not playing. There's a lot of depth there, but sometimes they never pan out like you hope. They're never going to be that. They're never going to hit the ceiling you're hoping they're going to hit. So the more guys you get, the better. On top of that, if you're so deep, you can use that one of your defensemen that kind of just on the outside of your top ones, and you could trade them for a chip for something that you need in the future. So for these 2 guys, Hagens and Schaefer, wouldn't be a bad thing. I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent there. Just the Sharks being on the basement isn't a terribly bad thing. Obviously, we like to see the Sharks do better, but if this is the last full tank year, I'm okay with it. But yeah, that's just going back to the Sharks second last place. It sucks. It sucks how they're doing it right now because of they don't seem to be handling the dog days of the season very well. They seem to they go with the lulls of everything, and it's kind of expected because this team A is not very deep, and B, there's a lot of young players that are still trying to figure things out, and it's the longest season they've ever played of hockey. So this is the kind of things they're gonna have to get out of their system. Unfortunately, though, just these last 2 games, the flat performances were not unforgivable, but they're pretty bad. In terms of the top point scorers for the Sharks, Mikael Granlund is still number 1. He's holding strong. He's fallen far from that point per game guy we've seen in the beginning of the season. Since Celebrini been back, he's taken less of that starting role. He's more just like taken over, besides the vet that was experienced for when Celebrini shouldn't be playing or when he needs some rest. So because of that, I think Granlund has hurt his point production a bit, but he's still leading in points for now. Celebrini was on the climb, but it turns out, he's been kind of cold lately. So while he is the highest, Celebrini has the most points per game for the Sharks. He's still 3rd place with 32 and 36 games. Granlund has 37 and 46 games, and William Eklund's 2nd place with 34 points in 43 games. So those are your top 3 guys. The constant, I just want to round out the top 4, is Tyler Toffoli. He's got 30 points in 47 games. But the big thing is that he has 17 goals, the most out of the team by far. 2nd place would be Celebrini with 13 goals. Yeah, Toffoli's just been that constant guy that he's almost like an unsung hero. Like, he does the right things. He's always in the right spots offensively. He's not the greatest defensively, but he's still pretty decent. And in terms of goal scoring, like, when you need a goal, he always seems to be there at the right time. Like, he does the right spots all the time. He just has that instinct. Obviously, he's still he's a veteran, so he should know this stuff. He's always been a good goal scorer, but it's good to see that he's just that constant guy that really, you're not putting a lot of pressure on him, like he's expected to do this kind of stuff, but he's just delivering, and that's something that has been good for the Sharks. Now, top 5, I'm going to say Fabian Zetterlund as well. I just want to mention him because he's got 28 points in 48 games. Another power forward. He's still kind of figuring his way out. I don't think he's going to actually match his goals that he got last year, just because his role kind of diminished. He's been kind of up and down the lineup just because of everyone else. Warsawski's trying to figure out where to fit everybody and give these young kids a top 6 chance in some games. So, yeah, Zetterlund's been kind of rounding out the top 5. He's been consistent in terms of some goals. Not great all around, but he's been okay. But yeah, he's just that power forward the Sharks kind of need right now, the new age power forward, I would say. He's not the type of guy that's going to hit and make those kinds of plays, or he's not physical all the time. But he's the type of guy, he's not afraid to drive to the net, do the dirty things, and he's got a lot of strength and speed to be able to get those kinds of goals that are, I would say, power forward goals. So that would be the top 5 point scorers for the San Jose Sharks and kind of a window of where they are right now in this point of the season. But now I want to get into Vlasic and his 1,300th game that he played this week. Big milestone. It was against the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I just want to kind of just give him a little shout out and honor because he's been such a solid Shark. It's hard to believe that he's now been the longest tenured Shark, at least right now. I think he's second most to Marleau right now. But yeah, he's just been a solid presence. He's had some ups and downs with the fans. Some people loved him when he was making $4 million a year, back when he was the best defensive defenseman in the world. Since his contract, we can talk about that a little bit later too. Obviously, he's been kind of an albatross since he signed that. There's the funny thing is, in his career, he's actually been plus 52 in his whole career if you look at everything, but he managed to still be plus 52. What's been remarkable is he's been a minus since 2018-2019, which, funny enough, was the first year he signed that 7-year contract. So since then, every year he's been a minus player. But he's been that good before. Before that point, he's been so good that even through all the minuses in the last 6 years, he's still a plus 52. So that goes to show you how good he was in the beginning of this contract. So 1,300 games played. Props to Vlasic. He's had 83 goals, 295 assists, 378 points, which is, good for less than 25% of the time he'll score a point. But that's not what he was there for. He was always like a defensive defenseman. He's played with a lot of great players. Just to name a few, he's played with Rob Blake. He's played with Scott Hannon. The famous him and Justin Braun, that defensive pairing during the Sharks' peak years was unstoppable. They would shut down the best players in the league for many, many years, and that would allow the Burns line, whoever Burns was partnered with at the time, to just light up the lamp and try and get points. He's just an unsung hero. There was many years that he was just underrated. And I remember even being a non-San Jose fan, I would talk to my Toronto Maple Leafs fans and tell them there's a game I watched, the way he boxed out Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane in his prime would come down the wing at his full speed with the puck. Vlasic could skate backwards, box him out, and keep up with Kane while preventing Kane from making any effective plays. And the reason that stood out to me is because you would never, it's such a boring play because he's shutting down the exciting play. So you'd never really see that in the highlight reel because no one would talk about that. So these little plays, he would do that consistently throughout the game that would turn exciting plays into boring nothing plays. And no one really giving props for it. But when you look at who he's going against, the best skaters at their best going forwards, and he's going backwards, shutting them down, it was unbelievable to me. So I would tell them that, and they would kind of laugh it off. My friends would kind of be like, whatever, he's not that great, you're just a Sharks fan, you're just talking a lot of crap. And then he'd be invited to the 2014 Olympics to represent Canada, and him and Doughty were just one of the best pairings out for Canada, as Doughty was available to do whatever he wanted to do. He didn't really have that responsibility with the Kings. As a King, he had to kind of play both defensive and offensive, but with Vlasic being able to hold the fort down and take over the defensive responsibilities, Doughty was there to pretty much help Team Canada get all the points. And that's what helped them win gold that year. So everyone got to see what Vlasic was capable of in Team Canada. And then after that, their eyes were open for him in San Jose. And that's when he was really at his peak. And during this whole time, mind you, he was only making $4 million on average per season. So that was the average annual value. And for years, everyone was saying he was underrated. Before Barkov was the conversation of he's underrated, until everyone was talking about me underrated, so he can't be underrated anymore. That was Vlasic. Everyone in the beginning, no one talked about him. And then people started kind of talking about him. And then after the Olympics, everyone was saying how underrated he was. He was at that point, people were saying, when you're saying he's underrated, then if everyone's saying it, then he's not really underrated anymore. But he was that guy for a while. It was just until that contract was signed that kind of everything kind of went upside down. But before that, everyone's saying he was underpaid, and now he's overpaid. But in a way, it all kinds of balances out when you look at it, because Vlasic was that good. He was a big piece of why the Sharks were so good. So I just wanted to give props to that fact, just the way he came up into the league. It just an unbelievable player, unbelievable career. And I just hope that the last few years don't kind of, smudge what he brought to the Sharks, because during their best, he was a big, big reason for that. So that's just something I want to give him shout out. 1,300 games, not easy to do. Just to last that long, especially some games lately, he's missed a few games over the last few years, and it seemed like his career was kind of done, but he's back now. He's just that solid, steady guy. He's definitely lost a step from what he used to be, but he's still a good guy having a room. He's got a good personality for the guys. He's a sarcastic, kind of dry humor type of guy that kind of, can lighten the room up a bit. But also he's just he still knows where to be positionally. He knows where his stick should be. It's just that he's lost a little bit of a step, and maybe he kind of mentally isn't, I don't want to say he doesn't care as much, but you can tell he's a little bit more lackadaisical, but he seems like he's happier than he's ever been before. One thing that he did talk about this week during, 1,300 games played, there's a lot more people asking questions about him. He pointed out that there should be a defensive defenseman award, and I strongly think if there was one, he would have won at least two. Maybe one for sure, but at least two. There's a couple of good seasons there where he really was remarkably like the shutdown guy. Like you would put him against any of the best players who are forwards, and he would be able to hold up against those guys. So yeah, he said that he wanted that there should be a defensive defenseman award. I fully agree with him. I think the Norris is kind of a joke in a way because it's never about the best defenseman, which is what the award is about. It's always the best offensive defenseman. That's like very offensive. Most of the time it's actually like when Erik Karlsson won it, for example, the 100-point season, he was a huge number. It was like a minus 20 or something like that. And the Sharks sucked, but the only reason he got that award is because he was the first guy to get first defenseman to get 100 points in like 30 years. So they just gave it to him by default. But if you're going to do that, get another award that's actually about the defensive defenseman. He made a good point. It's ridiculous how there's a defensive forward award, but there's no defensive defenseman award when defense is the whole point. If you're a defenseman, I don't care how many points you can get. Can you shut down the other guys? I think the best type of defenseman is the all-around type of guy. That should be the real Norris award. It shouldn't just be the guy who gets the most points, but the guy you can put out there like a Hedman in his prime. He's the type of guy who could score some points for you. You can put him on the power play. He'll help out. He knows how to get the puck to the right guys, but also you put him down to shut down everyone else. That should probably be the Norris, but unfortunately it's not. So it's not out of the realm to actually have a defensive defenseman award. So shout out to Vlasic for pointing that out. Obviously he called it. He's right. He probably deserved two of those types of awards, at least two. In my opinion, like four. He had 4 amazing years as probably the best defensive defenseman in the world. Between when he was undersung, between 2012 to 2014, easily. And the reason you could probably take it away after that is because him and Braun were always considered that pair together that did things. So you had to give shout out to Braun because they did have a great chemistry together. But Vlasic really drove that line as like that pairing because he just was unbelievable. So yeah, shout out to the Vlasic, 1,300 games played. But the question is, like, what is his future as a Shark? Because he's been a Shark for so many years now. He's like one of the most tenured Sharks. I'm sure if you asked him, he'd love to stay in San Jose. But would he go to another team if he had a chance to win the Cup? Now, not this year for sure. The Sharks don't have any salary to retain. He's worth $7 million a year. No team is going to take him for that because he's definitely not worth that anymore. Next year, the Sharks will have one slot available to trade someone with salary retained. I don't think it's going to be Vlasic, to be honest. I think he's going to play his contract out in San Jose. But after that, what's the question? Will you re-sign in San Jose? It's going to be hard to say because in 2 years from now, Luca Cagnoni will definitely be on the team. Sam Dickinson arguably could be on the team. Depends how he plays the rest of the season and even next year. I don't see Dickinson playing next year, but in 2 years, very, very possible. Because by that time, he's going to be too old to play in the OHL anymore. He'll probably be able to at least be playing in the AHL, so he'll probably make get his chance there. At that point, McMadolan will probably be a good experienced player for the Sharks already. So it's really hard to say where he'll be. Having that presence, if he's down to be like a 6-7 type of a player, maybe he'll sign for really cheap. It's potentially possible to be in San Jose. Again, that experience he had, the wisdom he can share with the young players would be, irreplaceable. But also there's that chance that maybe he'll just want to play for a team that's very good and be a 6-7 guy for a team that could win a cup. My guess, honestly, would be Montreal. He'd be perfect there because he's from there. He's from Quebec. And, the Montreal Canadiens are on the up. They could be, by 2 years from now, they might be a team that could be knocking on the door in terms of playoff contention. They are playing pretty well right now. They got a lot of young stars. Another defenseman that's able to, just mentor the young players to get better. That Lane Hudson guy, even though he's more of an offensive guy, there is a lot of things that could work for Vlasic. I like to see that, to be honest, and playing for Montreal just because he gets to kind of play for his hometown team and then maybe retire after that. He is 37 years old. I don't know how much he has left in the tank, especially after a couple of injuries that he's had the last few years. So my guess is, honestly, he'll probably try with another team, and that'll probably be his last go. But I'm hoping for Montreal. So, yeah, unfortunately, Vlasic, I don't see him becoming a Shark after this, but what a career he's had so far. Like 1,300 games played. No one can take that away from him. Was the best defensive defenseman in the world. Unfortunately, a lot of teams, unless you're a San Jose Sharks fan, will remember those years. So that kind of is sad to see that he probably won't be remembered like compared to like the Brent Burnses and the Erik Karlssons, but at least as a Shark, he'll always be remembered as one of the best to ever play. So he's been great, and you can't win without a good defense, but you also can't win without good goaltending, and the Sharks have had that lately with Alexandar Georgiev, and he's himself has had a great turnaround to his career. Basically, when he was with Colorado, he had the negative connotation name of being called Forgiev, as in like he lets in 4 goals a game on average. And he came into the San Jose Sharks as like a piece for Blackwood, just to kind of as a wash, so the Sharks will have some kind of a goaltender. But on top of that, the Sharks have actually been capable of turning him into a more competent goalie. So just looking at the stats, what happened just the past couple of weeks, actually just overall, let's just look at Colorado. He's played 17 games this season for Colorado. He won 8 games, lost 7. Considering how good Colorado is, it's not a surprise. So you could argue the team probably won it for him. His goals against average was 3.38. His save percentage was 8.74. As a Shark, he's only played half as many games so far, 9 games. He's 2-7, so the wins and losses aren't surprised because the Sharks aren't very good. But goals against average, he's 3.51. So he's actually managed to get more goals against. So by 0.13, not that much more, but he's just a little bit more in terms of goals against. And save percentage has improved from 8.74 in Colorado to 8.9. So right off the bat, you're going to say, well, it's not that much of improvement, right? Because Georgiev has been kind of, in the beginning when he started for the Sharks, he was kind of meh, but when he's the last few games, he's actually been very, very good. So if you take into account, remove the Islanders game, so he's 0.871, which is very good. For Columbus, he was 0.909. Detroit, he was 0.893, which again, not very good. But before that, against Utah, he was 0.923 save percentage, and against Vegas, he was 0.927. So just looking at those 2 performances, he was actually pretty remarkable. A lot of 0.8s there, but 0.87, 0.82, but there are really good performances out there that has turned him around. So with Georgiev, is it possible to have been like flip him for something good? That's the question to ask, because he's not like remarkably like stand out as good as Blackwood was when he was a Shark. But can the Sharks maybe trade him to a team that is looking for some kind of goaltending depth? He's obviously not going to be a number 1 guy that's going to, challenge for a cup with the team. But are the Sharks capable to get something good for him? So just looking at the trade, going back to what the Sharks got, how the Sharks got him. When the Sharks gave away Blackwood, they gave away Blackwood, Smith, and a 5th-round pick. The Sharks got back Kovalenko, another 5th-round pick, and Georgiev. So, like I said, it was kind of a wash. The Sharks were giving a goalie, so they felt they needed a goalie back. Georgiev, not only did he join the Sharks, he was actually given back with salary retained. Really, I would say Kovalenko was really the heart of that piece for the Sharks. They wanted another forward, but Georgiev was more of a project. So that's kind of where you could go. So you can't really say that Blackwood and Georgiev were like 1-for-1 comparable. It was more of the package how it was given. But so I can't really say we're going to get back another goalie. It's more like if the Sharks were to give Georgiev to another team, we'll probably get their worst goalie as kind of a wash trade. So I wanted to compare to like goalies that have been traded over the last couple of deadlines to see what we could probably get. So Jake Allen was given to the New Jersey Devils last trade deadline, not last offseason, from the Canadiens, who had a very good season, and it was just a 3rd-round pick. So it was a 3rd-round pick in 2025 draft that this season. So last year was 2024, so it was a whole year later that this 3rd-round pick was given. So right off the bat, you can see that for a decent goalie, that Jake Allen was a much better goalie than what Georgiev is right now. And the Canadiens only got a 3rd-round pick for the following year. That goes to show you that kind of the market isn't really huge for the goaltending right now. So yeah, that just for at least last season. 2 years ago, Korpisalo was another big name who was playing for the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was playing fairly well, not great, but well enough that he was on the trade board and that teams were interested in him. There was just a lot of controversy. Columbus was kind of not controversial, but like they had a lot of issues with their goaltending, especially with their recent history. So that was more of a trade that was necessary to get him out of Columbus. It wasn't even he was the heart of the trade. What the Los Angeles Kings really wanted was Gavrikov. I think Korpisalo was just kind of like a bonus. They wanted someone who was a little bit better because Quick was getting old. He was still coming out of an injury, so he was traded to Columbus with with a first round pick and a third round pick to Columbus, and what LA got back was Gavrikov and Korpisalo. So these are the only two goalies I would say were actually in the trade, like big enough to be traded, to see what their values were. And Korpisalo is kind of a complicated one because it's more Gavrikov that the LA Kings wanted, and that's what got the first round pick for to Columbus. But Korpisalo being part of that trade, you could say maybe that third round pick is what Korpisalo was probably worth. So yeah, it looks like the last 2 years, a third round pick is probably what you're looking for a stud goalie. And unfortunately, like I said, the Georgiev isn't that stud goalie. He's just been improved. I don't see him joining a team to win a cup with, but maybe as like a depth guy, like I said. So looking at teams that might be interested in a Korpisalo, I was looking at the teams with the highest goals against that are at least contending for a spot right now, and there's no real contender that stands out to me per se. Like the Pittsburgh Penguins have the most goals against this season, so they just got rid of Jari. They sent him down to the AHL. He's had a very bad season, and he's kind of had a long contract. They figured by throwing him through waivers, worst case, he can play in the AHL, kind of play better. Best case, someone picks him up for that whole contract, which would kind of save Pittsburgh some headache. Unfortunately, no one picked him up, so he's down at the AHL right now playing for Wilkes-Barre Penguins. So, yeah, the Penguins could use that goaltending depth. They're still trying to turn this season around, but it looks like they're at that point now where maybe there's nothing that can save them anymore. They may not be looking for goaltending depth right now. The Philadelphia Flyers, in their hand, they're in that borderline. Maybe they could still push for a playoff spot. They're third last with 161 goals against. So, yeah, they could use that goaltending depth. They have a lot of no-name young rookies that are part of that team. Georgiev could be that at least solid guy that could turn things around for them. The thing with Georgiev is he needs a really good system in front of him. Obviously, with Colorado, he did have a terrible goals against average and save percentage, but he was winning games for Colorado because they're just that good. So if he could have that kind of forward, or just the players in front that played a lot better, he could turn things around. You never know. So they're a team that potentially could use that. Another one is the Columbus Blue Jackets. So they're about fifth from last in terms of goals against, 155 goals against. They could use some goaltending depth as well. That's something that they could change with Georgiev as well. I could see that, just having that veteran presence. It's very possible. Another one I've noticed as well is Seattle. They're in an interesting situation as they have Decord and Grubauer. The only thing is, like, Decord's playing fairly well, but Grubauer has been absolutely awful. Both these goalies are set up in a contract for a long time, paid pretty highly. So Grubauer, if he joined the Sharks, it would kind of be an anchor for a bit. I don't think that would really help the Sharks out very well. So it would have to be a very big sweetener with Grubauer that comes back. I mean, the Sharks, Astrov's the number one guy, no matter what. We know that. And they just need some kind of competent backup for a bit. The Sharks' money is no issue, but it soon will be when they have to start paying their young guys. Grubauer could be a potential landing for San Jose as a trade, but Seattle would want to push. They could use a guy like Georgiev, so that's something that could work out well. Grubauer is at 0.87 save percentage versus Decord's 0.916, so that complete difference is the reason why I think that Seattle could use him. But yeah, so those are the three teams I would say. Pittsburgh, Columbus, and Seattle could probably use it. Now I have a long shot dark horse one as well, and that is the Florida Panthers. Now, hear me out. Bobrovsky is their number one guy right now. There was a lot of controversy just before they won a cup of if he's even capable of winning a cup for them. He's turned that upside down. He's been able to do it. But the Florida Panthers, while they're not like dead last, they're kind of in the middle with 142 goals against. Bobrovsky has been amazing, so you can't really argue that they want to replace him. But Spencer Knight is an interesting project that could be for the Sharks. Now, I know that he's not terrible. He's got a .905 save percentage, but with Bobrovsky, he still has a few years left in that contract. He's the clear number one guy. Spencer Knight was supposed to be that heir apparent to Bobrovsky before that contract was signed. After the contract was signed, but he was supposed to be the next guy anyway. And he's had some issues. He was in the NHL's assistance program for substance abuse. So he's obviously had some ups and downs and some confidence issues. So maybe a huge change of scenery could help him out. And to see him and Georgia and Askarov playing together, maybe that would be able to kind of boost Askarov to play even better, to have that kind of young goaltender to push him as well. And then maybe just trade him in the future as well. So I would say if Florida needs some kind of a a veteran backup for Bobrovsky in case he gets injured or something during this next playoff run. Florida's obviously poised to win another cup. They want to win another cup. They're in at least second place in the Atlantic Division last I saw, so they're up there. So this could be a potential fit, maybe if they're looking for depth. But realistically, Spencer Knight's still better than Georgiev right now. I don't see them doing it, but I thought I'd throw that out there that Florida is a potential trade piece. So Georgiev, right now, I would say he still has a little bit more time to improve before he's tradable. I think he's one of those guys that in the last minute is just a trade deadline kind of acquisition. Maybe the Sharks get a fourth. A third would be nice, but it looks like just historically, a third round pick is what the good goalies have gone for the last couple of seasons. So him being not as good, a fourth or a fifth, it's a pick, it's a lottery ticket, but something that the Sharks could use because the Sharks don't really need Georgiev anyway. They have the future set up with Askarov and Ned anyway, and they even have some good guys in the depth. So, and Vanecek's even injured. On top of that, Vanecek's still here. He's just got a broken cheek. And unfortunately, the longer he's gone, the harder it is for the Sharks to showcase him, to trade him. So Georgiev is really the only guy right now, the only goaltender right now the Sharks could use as trade bait. So that's why I kind of wanted just to try this exercise to see what the Sharks could get for him, because he's really the only one that's tradable. And unfortunately, it's not much, but at least it's something, Why not just get something out of that? So on top of getting Kovalenko for Blackwood, you get another potential pick in Georgiev on top of your fifth round pick in 2025, which technically was a wash because you gave your fifth round for 2027. So I don't know. I'd like to see Georgiev go to a team that can potentially be a contender and just give him a chance to win, while the Sharks kind of just build up their youth and keep building up their prospect pool. So that's something I would like to see. So, yeah, Georgiev, we love you. I hope you get better. You still have time to even get better, but I'd like to see you go for something good. So we'll have to go with that. So with that being said, let's tear down the games of the week. All right, so the Sharks continue their road trip as they visit the Detroit Red Wings on Tuesday night, and they'll be playing against Coach Todd McLellan, who's been coaching Detroit for a couple of weeks now, and Detroit has been a whole different team with him as the coach. They were on a 7-game win streak at the start of this game, and it's a big game for the Sharks, obviously, because McLellan he coached the Sharks a long time ago. That was actually the first team he coached. He left Detroit as an assistant coach when he joined the Sharks, and he's still the winningest coach for the Sharks in history. So this is kind of a big game in terms of that, if you're like a big Sharks fan. Otherwise, young team, they don't really remember him, other than Vlasic, though, as Vlasic's the only Shark on the roster that actually had McLellan as a coach back in the day. So that's kind of cool. Just a little side note. But yeah, the biggest thing here is that since the coaching change to Detroit, the Detroit Red Wings, who are kind of a bottom barrel team, they're looking way outside the playoff window. They've kind of turned things around with him. So the Sharks had a little bit of a tough game ahead of them, even though Detroit's not really considered a good team. Wallman also returned to the Detroit Red Wings stadium in Detroit. Big deal because, the way he left Detroit kind of gave him up for nothing, gave him to the Sharks for future considerations practically. So yeah, the Sharks were happy to have him. He's been a revelation, the best all-around defenseman for the Sharks. So we're happy to have him. Obviously, the Sharks are going to be playing hard for him to embarrass the team that let go of him for nothing. And Georgiev would be in net against Husso. At this point, Georgiev had a pretty good week prior, so he deserved to start against Detroit. And that's how the game started, basically. And the one thing that was really cool is that 2 defensive defensemen scored for the Sharks, which is rare enough that defense scored for the Sharks. But Ruda and Ferrero did find the back of the net in their own relative ways. But yeah, let's get into the game. So Ruda would actually be the first one to score for the Sharks pretty early into the game. It was just kind of a weird play. Ruda's in the right place at the right time. Snipes the top corner. Smith would actually get an assist, which was nice to see. So that would make it 1-0 nice and early. But the next goal, the Sharks, the Sturm would score on a short-handed goal. It was a really nice play by William Eklund. He's in the neutral zone. He has his, he's kind of looking completely away from the net. He kind of picks up the puck, and somehow Sturm has a break, an open net break, completely in the trade zone. Eklund sees this somehow with his head turned backwards. He backhand passes it towards the center of the ice. Sturm just takes it in for a breakaway and scores. It is 2-0 San Jose. Less than 3 minutes into the first period. Things are looking very, very good, but near the end of the period, Tarasenko would make it 2-1. It was a weird kind of bounce off the backboards, and Tarasenko was in the right place at the right time in the slot. Snipes the top corner. and that would make it 2-1. This was actually in the second period. Sorry, the first minute in the second period. So for the first two periods, it was actually kind of a low-scoring, low-event game. The Sharks are up 2-1 at least, so things were looking A-okay. The Sharks are holding on to a team that looked like it was going to be just a defensive game. Nothing crazy going on, but the third is when things really lit up. So William Eklund would score his 10th of the season. Celebrini sees him. It was actually a really cool cross-ice pass. They're both low by the net. Celebrini's on one side, and he passes it, shoots it across to William Eklund, who's there backdoor, who snipes the top corner to make it 3-1. Just a little bit after that, Tarasenko would make it 3-2. Same type of a play, except it was actually an intentional bounce off the board. So someone from the point, I think it was Gustafsson, shot it. It went off the backboards. It was a perfect play. Tarasenko's up by the slot, and he snipes it top corner. But a little bit after that, Granlund would make it 4-2, and he would end up scoring a really nice backhanded goal. Celebrini again with a beautiful pass to him, and Granlund with a nice little backhand top corner. He would shoot it top corner from the backhand right in front of Husso, and that would make it 4-2. Raymond would then make it 4-3 a little bit later, but Toffoli's goal, it was kind of a chaos in the net. Toffoli would make it 5-3, which kind of put everything away halfway through the third period. Toffoli was just in the right place at the right time. There's kind of chaos going around. Eklund gets to Toffoli, and it goes in the net. And then Ferrero would end up scoring the empty net goal at the end, just from his own end, the Sharks' end. He would kind of flip it up, and it would go in the right place at the right time. So basically, the Sharks end up winning this game 6-3. It was a pretty defining win. The Sharks, were pretty good the first two periods. We're holding on basically to a 2-goal lead until Tarasenko scored, but it still seemed like the Sharks were not going to cough this lead up. They ended up being outshot by Detroit 28-24 because they did let up near the end, but they did go on that scoring tear in the third period, which kind of made everything decisive after that. They were also successful in the power play. They were 1-for-1, while Detroit was 0-for-2. In terms of penalty minutes, the Sharks only had the 4-minute penalty during that. I believe someone was bleeding there. Which goal was that one? It was the Granlund one on the third period. So that one, I believe, there was blood on the ice from that one, so that's why it was a 4-minute penalty. But yeah, so the Sharks would score on that one, while Detroit Sharks special teams for his penalty kill was very, very good. But in terms of hits, Detroit out-hit the Sharks 21-18. The Sharks out-blocked Detroit 18-9, and the giveaways were a wash 18-18, and the Sharks takeaways were 8-5. So the Sharks end up winning the season series 2-0. They beat Detroit 5-4 on November 18th, and 2 months later, which was this past week, they beat them 6-3. So the Sharks seem to have Detroit's number this year. Destroy the Detroit's nice 7-game win streak, the nice start with Cobb McClellan. And that was an unexpected win, as I expected the Sharks during the scheduled win loss to lose this one. Detroit was on a hot streak, so it was kind of expected. It was kind of a good feel-good moment. It felt like the Sharks figured out a way how to light the lamp, and it looked like they could kind of go towards the momentum. Celebrini was spectacular in this one. He was all over the place again. 2 really brilliant assists by him, and just things that were just unbelievable. Georgiev as well. He was great. That makes him, at this point, he had 3 great games at that point, and everything just looked really good for him there. And the fact that Vlasic and Ruda were third-pairing defensemen in this game, they each got a point. So if Ruda got his first goal and Vlasic got an assist, that was another really cool thing for this game that kind of happened there. And everything just seemed like it was on the up, and this road trip turned out it was going to be very, very good. Turned out it wouldn't, though, but it looked like it was going to start off the week well, and we're going to tear into the other games and how awful they were. But this game was still a nice statement game for the Sharks. If they could find their confidence, their groove from this game back in the upcoming week, that would be very helpful. It's going to be tough, but if they could figure out what they did right here and go with that against Boston on Monday, that would be very helpful. But unfortunately, the rest of the week did not seem to fare that way at all. All right, second game of the week, the San Jose Sharks were visiting the Columbus Blue Jackets on Thursday night, and there's no nice way to put this. It was a stinker. The defense was awful. All around, everyone was terrible, but the defense specifically, all 6 guys that played that night were terrible. So, in the first 8 minutes of the game, Fantilli would find the net for the Columbus Blue Jackets. It was basically a terrible play by Ruda. He gave it up and he was too slow to stop the 2-on-1, and Vlasic tried his best to catch up and to get Fantilli. Unfortunately, there was no chance for either one of them. They just couldn't handle it, and Werenski would take it up. By the way, he was fantastic this whole game. He was all over the place, kind of like an Erik Karlsson. He was a rover. He was like in front of Georgiev causing problems. He was in the point. He'd skate behind the net. He was just all over the place. But in this case, he was there for the 2-on-1 to feed Fantilli, and Vlasic couldn't hold off Fantilli. It was just a step too far back, and it would make it 1-0 for the Columbus Blue Jackets. A little bit later after that, the Sharks gave up another 2-on-1. That was the back-to-back 2-on-1 from that first goal as well. Sturm also had a chance, but that was stopped. And a little bit later, Johansson would score for Columbus, making it 2-0. Another defensive lapse where Ferrero tried to clear the puck behind the net, and Liljegren was just on the other side trying to give him support. Ferrero tries to pass it to him, so it's a little bit on Ferrero for giving too hard of a pass to Liljegren, who was trying to receive the pass on his off-stick side to get it comfortably. So it kind of bounces off Liljegren's stick from the pass. He loses possession, and then right after that, Corrali would pick up the puck, give it to Kent Johnson, and Concha would get his 12th of the season. So right off the bat, the Sharks are playing awfully terrible in the first period, and they would only get 6 shots on net that whole period, which is not even the worst of the game yet. So yeah, the Sharks defense was completely awful just to start that game, but Georgiev was the shining star for the Sharks. He actually was playing pretty well. First of all, he stopped 11 out of 13, which is not ideal per the number stats, but there was a lot of saves out there where you'd have to like jump from one side of the net to stop a goal. So not a lot against Georgiev, especially since there was a lot of 2-on-1s that were given away from the Sharks in the first period. So to start the second, the Sharks did have a better jump to them. Unfortunately, the defense was still making a couple of lapses and mistakes, but there were no shots on goal for the Sharks, unfortunately, during this time right in the beginning. And halfway through the period, JVR would score for this Columbus Blue Jackets, bringing it 3-0. It was actually a point shot from Severson that would hit JVR's stick. He would tip it in to get his 7th of the season. And it was something that the Sharks just, I wouldn't put it too much against the Sharks. It was just one of those things where it was just a perfect point shot. It was a very fast play. The Sharks did try to cover their guys, but unfortunately it was just one of those things where it went in the net. It was just a little bit of chaos going on. Unfortunately for that one, Toffoli surprisingly got a penalty just after that. He slashed Werenski, who obviously Werenski being all over the place, Toffoli couldn't really catch up to him, and he just slashed him at the wrong place, wrong time. Fortunately, Columbus's power play was pretty sloppy, so they couldn't have a chance to set it up. But at the end of the power play, Columbus finally got their second power play unit to get a decent setup, but there was no good goals there, so Sharks would kill that penalty. I made a note here, halfway through the first period, the Sharks had gone 15 minutes with no shot on goal. They actually are, at this point, it was 20-6 shots on goal for Columbus, and the Sharks would actually end the second period with only 2 shots on goal. So the first period was actually better with the 6 shots, surprisingly. So in the end, it was just an awful period at that. Zetterlund, at the end of the second, did have a beautiful backhand chance, but the Sharks didn't end up scoring with that one. The Sharks did have a little bit of fight at the end of the period, but honestly, nothing really stood out there. Georgiev was also great in that second period. The third period, it was the way the second ended, actually. Zetterlund hooked hooked Zetterlund, so the Columbus Blue Jackets would start the third period on the penalty kill. The Sharks would have a chance to get a power play goal. Unfortunately, they didn't get it out of that. There'd be nothing out of that. The Sharks had a couple of good opportunities, but nothing really came out of that one. But they did find the back of the net. Toffoli would score about 8 minutes into this third period. Eklund was kind of holding off the defender on the half wall. He managed to get the puck to Celebrini, who centered it to Toffoli, who's standing right in front of the net, and he would end up getting his own rebound and getting it in the net. Tyler Toffoli has just been, like I keep saying, the constant for the Sharks. He's right place, right time. Defensively, he's not 100% there, but he always seems to know where to be to score the goals, and he's already got 17 at this point. And another amazing pass from Celebrini. So Celebrini would get that assist, and it would be 3-1 Columbus. So at this point, halfway through the period, just after that Toffoli goal, the Sharks had 9 shots on goal, and just in that half period, they had more shots on goal than the entire first 2 periods. So that was an improvement for the Sharks. Unfortunately, they wouldn't really make much of that. Liljegren would hook Marchenko a little bit later. San Jose would kill that penalty, but nothing really happened in the third. There'd be a little bit of back and forth until 2 minutes and 30 left. 2 minutes and 30 seconds left into the third period. Georgiev would be pulled. It would be 6-on-5 for for San Jose, and JVR would end up scoring his second of the night. It was another empty net goal. Nothing too crazy. Granlund was kind of lazy on the point, though, so the Sharks were in the offensive attack. Granlund's up in the top point. He's trying to set up a nice point pass or trying point play. He's just 1 second too much overthinking where he has the puck too long. Loses the puck, and just after that, Marchenko takes the puck up and skates as fast as he can, finds James Van Riemsdyk, who has an open net shot and would score, making it 4-1 for Columbus. So technically, the Sharks did lose 3-1 in terms of the game itself, but they giving up the empty net goal makes it look a little bit worse than it was. But the best chance of the game Wenberg did have for San Jose, it was a one-timer in front of Verzlikins. He'd make nothing of it, but the Columbus Blue Jackets would win 4-1. Like I said, the defense was completely terrible. You could count from the top to the bottom. There were so many defensive lapses, bad passing, just all around awful play for all 6 Sharks. Georgiev was the only real good Shark here. Celebrini had some moments, but Georgiev was the all-around constant for the Sharks in this game. Another note I made was that Werenski was all over the place. He is probably one of the best rovers that is unsung right now. Everyone talks about Makar and Hughes right now, but Werenski looked really good. I think he should be considered in consideration just based off this game for the Norris Trophy as well. Based on what it is, like we talked about before, it's an offensive trophy and he's offensive, so that's very good. The Sharks surprisingly had the worst second period. Considering all season long, they were praised for how good their second periods have been. Lately, though, their second periods have been pretty terrible this past week. Especially this game was terrible. And Celebrini, I wanted to point out too, in the beginning of the game, he was really having trouble with the faceoffs there. He didn't win a faceoff for the first half of the game at all. He was like 0 for 4, and I saw Warsofsky was kind of limiting his faceoffs after that. But he did end the game later with 7 out of 9 faceoffs, so he did end up getting a little bit better. So he won 7 and he lost 9 faceoffs. So he improved that way, but that's the one thing I want to point out. He's still a rookie, nothing to really be concerned about, but his faceoffs were a little bit awful. And yeah, the Sharks would lose that game. A stinker the Sharks are hoping to put behind them. Unfortunately, they would kind of have another repeat against the Islanders here. All right, the final game of the week, the Sharks were in the New York Islanders barn on Saturday night. It was an early game for the San Jose Sharks fans. It was supposed to be a 4:30 p.m. Pacific time start, but the Islanders were celebrating Brent Sutter. He was inducted to the New York Islanders Hall of Fame. He was one of the players that were a big part of those 4 Stanley Cups back in the early 80s for the Islanders, so this game didn't start until 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time, so that might have thrown the Sharks off, and also it probably could have given the Islanders just a little bit of juice in their game. That's what some of the players were saying, that the energy that the fans gave them for that ceremony gave the Islanders a little bit more just more excitement and energy versus the Sharks coming in after a long trip in the road. Maybe we're a little bit more flat. This is the type of game, though, that the Sharks should have been prepared for out of all 3 teams. I know all 3 teams were not in the playoffs right now, but the Islanders are not in any hot streak. Detroit and Columbus were kind of the Sharks coming into those games as those teams were in a nice hot streak versus the Islanders are kind of been flat. So it was expected the Sharks are going to play a little bit better. Unfortunately, that was not the case. But yeah, so the game was a little bit delayed because of that reason. Georgiev would actually stand in for Askarov. Askarov is a little bit sick. There's like some kind of a sickness going on in the locker room right now, and Askarov would actually stay back as a backup, and Georgiev would start his I believe his 3rd straight game after that. So he's been very good. So the Sharks at least don't have any worry about him playing in front of him because he's been pretty good. Toffoli was also out with a lower body injury, which hurts the Sharks a lot. That constant player, that top 6 guy that you know is going to perform, you know exactly what he brings. So that definitely hurts the Sharks a little bit with that depth. So Warsofsky did have to shuffle the lines around to make up for that lack of depth. But yeah, the Sharks just had a really bad game overall. That's just the way to put it. The defense was just as bad, but the offense could be blamed as well. So yeah, let's just tear into this game. And right off the bat, McLean scored for the New York Islanders in the beginning. Fortunately for the Sharks, they got a break because it was called off instantly by the refs for goaltender interference. So the Sharks had a chance to make up for it. So for the whole entire first period, at least the Sharks did not give up any goals during that time. They did only manage to get 4 shots on net in the first period versus the Islanders did manage to get 10 shots on net. There was also a crazy chain of events where Celebrini would strip the puck from an Islander player in the Sharks zone, but then Graf would take the puck up in the New York Islanders zone. He'd lose the puck off a sloppy pass, and the New York Islanders would take it back to the defensive end. Wallman would pick that pass off, and then a New York Islander player would end up breaking Eklund's pass, and he would cough it up in the Shark zone. So it was a little giveaway, takeaway going back and forth for about a minute. I wanted to point that out there. The Sharks would get a penalty, so Delangelo would be holding Barzal. The Sharks would kill that penalty at least. In the first period, the Sharks coming away with not getting a goal against with that McLean goal. So it was 0-0. The Sharks were pretty flat against Columbus, though, or against the New York Islanders, just like they were against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And again, Georgiev, I've been saying this whole podcast with all three games, but he was actually spectacular in that first period. So the Sharks basically get a lucky one in the first period. They were flat, but they still had a chance to win this game as it was still 0-0 going into the second period. Unfortunately, Barzal would score, making it 1-0 halfway through the second period. This was a defensive lapse on Wallman, so he loses the puck on the point from the Islanders zone, and Barzal picks it up and has a breakaway and makes no mistake, ends up passing it through Georgiev. I think it was he just gets around the pad as Georgiev tries to do a split save, and it goes in. It's 1-0 for the New York Islanders, and just after that, as Randy and Drew are kind of talking about how flat the Sharks have been, they have very few shots on goal. Goodrow would make it 1-1 with a very lucky, kind of a fluky goal. He was just way off in the side of the hash marks by the outside of the faceoff dot, and there was just kind of chaos going on there, and he takes advantage of a rookie goalie and just flips into the net, and it just finds a little hole, little bit of the seams, and goes in the net. Again, the Sharks are getting very lucky here. They're not playing spectacularly well, but they managed to still make it 1-1 halfway through the period. And this is when they're already, well, at least in the second period, they only had 7 shots on goal. And at this point, they probably had about maybe 7 total. And yeah, Goodrow would actually make it a tie game, and the Sharks still have a chance to win this game again. But the Sharks, typically just like they used to earlier in the season, a few seconds later, not like 40 seconds later, the Islanders respond with a Brock Nelson goal. Wallman again coughs up the puck, and he can't catch up. Cece's too slow to catch up to Nelson as he gets a breakaway, and Nelson would end up scoring at top corner, and it was just a bad play from Cece and Wallman all around. Too slow to catch up to those guys, and now it's 2-1 New York Islanders, who are already stomping on the Sharks, and the Sharks are having a hard time just making any offensive play. But yeah, just before that, the whole game was really, there was no real animosity between the two players. They're playing just hockey. No one was hating each other. But after that goal, there was a little bit of chaos going on there. Thrun was in the middle of it before the commercial break. And after that commercial break, Eklund actually had a second great defensive play of the game. There was a shot block where he stopped a shot point blank from the slot. So Eklund actually having a pretty decent defensive game here. Unfortunately, at the end of the second period, Dobson would get a point shot. No one's covering the point man. This is the first of the last two goals, where the Sharks again I say this a lot this season, but they just seem to be too low. They're collapsing so tightly on Georgiev. In this case, the two forwards, no one's covering the defensive point men for the New York Islanders. So Dobson has all the time in the world just to take a slap shot, and it goes in the net, making it 3-1. So the Sharks end the second period with an awful performance again. One lucky goal, and just the defense was just not there, just like they were against Columbus Blue Jackets. There were a couple of great defensive plays from Eklund, but other than that, Georgiev and Eklund were the only ones that really stood out of that period. Period 3 starts, and just in the first couple of minutes, another defenseman scores a goal for the New York Islanders. Pollock would make another point shot. Same type of play. The Sharks are too deep in their own zone. No one's covering a point guy. No one's moving around. They're kind of just trying to block off the middle space, and they have all the time in the world to slap it top corner for that one. So that was just a really terrible defensive play for the Sharks again. I don't know if it's a Warsofsky thing where he really likes the guys collapsing too tightly, but I think that there's a couple of forwards there that need to be able to get in the way of these defensemen, at least block a shot or put a stick in the way to kind of make these defensemen have a harder time to shoot, because they're given all this space and time to shoot it. And if you're in front of your goalie, he can't see the puck. He's completely screened by not only you guys, but also the other team's guys that are standing in front of him. And that's pretty much what happened for both the Dobson and the Pollock goals. So at this point, it's 4-1. The Sharks at least did not give up any empty net goals this time, but it's like few and far between. In a way, you could argue, what is better? The Sharks losing to Columbus 3-1 and giving up an empty net goal, or losing to the Islanders 4-1 cleanly, no empty net goals. That's up to you to decide. You can let me know in the comments what you think is worse. But in this case, the Sharks had two terrible performances, and against the Islanders, they lost 4-1. This is the team they'll actually see again the next on March 8th, and they'll be in San Jose. So at least the Sharks will have a chance to kind of make up for this terrible loss. The shots on goal were 31-19 for New York. The faceoffs were close to 50-50. New York had the edge at 51%. Neither team got a power play goal, but there are only 2 penalties this game, which is a surprise. Very low penalties. Like I said, there was not a lot of animosity between these two teams, so there was no penalty based on emotion. It was just a lot of two nothing penalties. One interference call with Pollock on Zetterlund, and I believe the other one was the Delanger holding Barzal. So really nothing to stand out that were really egregious over hate or anything like that. The hits were 40-37 for San Jose. Block shots were 20-16 for the New York Islanders. San Jose had more giveaways, 28-24, and the takeaways were 4-2. So a lot of giveaways between 4-2 for the New York Islanders. So a lot of giveaways between the Islanders and the Sharks overall. Just a sloppy game for San Jose. A game they honestly should have won. I know there was momentum with this whole ceremony thing for, the Islanders were honoring an old player when they won their cups. But the Sharks definitely should have beat this team that was not on any kind of a hot streak. They're still very cold. They're in the bottom of the standings, and this could be a game that could the Islanders can rally around and turn things around. Who knows? But the Sharks had a very sloppy game. Hopefully they turn things around for the next week, although I have a hard time seeing that, which we're going to talk about later in the scheduled win-loss segment. But first, let's tear down the Barracuda. All right, so the Barracuda only actually played one game this week. They played the Abbotsford Canucks last night. They lost 3-2. Shakir McMadulan was playing for the Sharks for a long time. He was called down to the San Jose Barracuda. He would play his first game for the Barracuda after his stint with the Sharks. He did not have a very great game. He was actually a -2. It was not very, very good for the Barracuda overall. And also on top of that, Linus Karlsson, who scored the first goal for the Abbotsford Canucks in that game, he was a former Shark draft pick, so that's kind of sticking it to the old team. One good thing is Luca Cagnoni did get a goal for the Barracuda, so that's one good thing to point out there. Romanov did get the start. He did lose. He made 28 saves out of 31, though, so you can't really complain there. But the Abbotsford Canucks are something the Sharks or the Barracuda should be worried about. They're actually on a 5-game winning streak after this game, and they're right behind the Barracuda in terms of the standings. They're 3 points behind. The Barracuda continue to fall down the standings from their wagon status from the beginning of the season when they were winning all their games. They seem to be humbled a lot. Right now they're falling behind from the Ontario Reign, the Detroit Firebirds, the Colorado Eagles. They're 5th place right now, and they're probably risking missing the playoffs right now. So this game I was hoping to see between the Calgary Wranglers and the San Jose Barracuda may not happen after all, or they'll have to really turn over this adversity here. It probably goes to show you how valuable Askarov must have been for the Barracuda, because when he played at the beginning of the season, they were amazing. So good goaltending goes a long way. Unfortunately, the Barracuda are on the other side of that right now. Not that Romanov's been terrible, but just not as consistent as Askarov has been, who rightfully so has been called up and deserves to be playing for the Sharks right now based on that performance. Now that we especially know that he's probably helped this team look better than they have really been. In terms of the points, the top point getters for the Barracuda, like I said, nothing's really changed too much. It's only been one game. Podorowski still stays number one, the Patrick Kane of the AHL, if you will. He's the only one that's over a point a game. He's got 36 points in 35 games. Colin Graff is still holding strong at second place in the team, considering he's been playing for the Sharks for the last couple of weeks now. In 29 games, he has 26 points. And Luca Cagnoni still hanging around third place in terms of points. 23 points in 35 games. He now has 9 goals for the season, which is pretty solid for a defenseman, even in the AHL. Ethan Cardwell has 22 points in 27 games. He's made a steady climb in the standings, or in the point standings for the Barracuda since he came back from the Sharks stint. And Philip Biestetz rounds out the top 5 with 19 points in 32 games for the Barracuda. And the Barracuda really are just in a little bit of a crossroads right now. They have to figure out what they are right now, because before they were the high-flying, high-scoring team, and right now they're losing these games that are not very impressive right now. They got to figure things out really quickly, because they could honestly find themselves out of a playoff spot. And the whole point of this season for me was to get these young guys to get experience in the playoffs, so that way when they join the Sharks, they had that, that swagger, that confidence that they're capable of doing that kind of stuff. So this team, I'm hoping, will turn things around. They have a lot of great talent here that should figure stuff out. Like I said, they have the Patrick Kane of the AHL. Podorowski was having a great season. Jack Thompson should have confidence for playing for the Sharks this season. Just like Guschin, Cardwell. There's just a bunch of guys. Mac Medulin even. He should have been playing a little bit better considering he just played against tougher competition. The only one that's been constant has been Cagnoni, who's been a decent offensive defenseman who probably will get his shot in the NHL next season. I just don't think it's his time this season, but who knows? Maybe by the end of the season, if the Sharks end up trading some guys at the deadline, Cagnoni might get a look. But right now, like, this team, if they want to have a chance to win the Calder Cup, they gotta figure their stuff out fast, because they are falling very far into the standings. So the Barracuda right now are, like I said, they're not looking fantastic right now, but things could turn around for them real fast if they just to get a couple wins here, just start putting things together, and good things can happen if they wanted to. It's just that right now things are obviously not looking great. So looking ahead of the schedule, they play the Abbotsford Canucks again today, Sunday, January 19th at 4 p.m. On Wednesday, they'll be hosting the Coachella Firebirds at home. So after their away games in Abbotsford, they'll at least be back in San Jose. And then they have another bunch of home games next weekend against the Toronto Marlies. A nice revenge game back in Toronto back in November. Hopefully they can figure things out and turn things around there. But right now they are kind of fumbling, and they really got to change things fast, because as of right now, like I said, in the standings, they are fifth place. They're fifth place in the Pacific Division, not the league, in the Pacific Division, and Abbotsford is knocking on the door. They have 5-game win streak right now, and they're only 3 points behind the Barracuda. So things can change really fast. The Barracuda aren't careful, so they could really turn things around. Luckily, the Coachella Valley Firebirds, the Barracuda seem to have their number this year, considering how Coachella Valley always seemed to have beaten the Barracuda over the last few years. So this could be something that could turn things around. And with the Toronto Marlies being a team that the Barracuda don't see very often, it could be a game that could turn things around, these 2 games. So hopefully these next 3 games, they actually get the 3 wins in a row. That's something to predict in the future, but that's not a scheduled win-loss that we do with the Barracuda. It's something we do with the San Jose Sharks, which is what we're going to do right now for the week ahead for the Sharks. All right, so we're going to look ahead right now, like I just said. The San Jose Sharks actually have 4 games this week. They haven't had a 4-game week since the end of November, so they had a nice little break of at least having more games off. Unfortunately, this one is going to be a tough week, so they're still on the road to start the week, and they have a really early game on Monday. So I believe it's because it's Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the U.S., so there are a lot of day games for the NHL. Boston will be hosting the San Jose Sharks at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So these early games, as far as I remember, San Jose does not really play very well. Maybe it's the jet lag, maybe it's the time difference, maybe the fact they're playing all the way in the East Coast. I don't know, but they historically never do very well at these. So to predict off the bat, I would probably assume they're going to lose to Boston. But let's just tear down more into what they're going to be facing here. So the Boston Bruins right now are not the powerhouse they have been over the past decade plus. They're actually fighting for a wild card spot right now. They're tied with Ottawa for the second wild card spot with 50 points, but Ottawa does have the games in hand. The Boston Bruins are minus 23 in goals differential, so that's something to stand out. They're actually when they were third place in the Atlantic, they actually had one of the worst goal differentials in the whole league. So it's not a surprise they've fallen off. But as of right now, the Boston Bruins have 50 points. They're still knocking on that door, so they are a desperate team. And one thing I want to point out that I think Randy pointed out in the game against the Islanders, the Sharks may seem to be playing these what they seem to be easy teams this week, but they're desperate teams. And that's what the Islanders and even the Red Wings and the Columbus Blue Jackets all were. They want to make the playoffs. They're not like the Sharks where you're kind of okay with being at the bottom and getting another draft pick. They want to turn their franchise around. They want to be able to show that they've already had their adversity over the years, and they want to be able to win versus the Boston Bruins. they're a team that they have been so good over the years. They want to prove that they're not out of it yet. So they're desperate. They at least want to make the playoffs and then feel that when they're in the playoffs, they can make a run out of it. So the Sharks, while the Boston Bruins are not a great team right now, as a matter of fact, they've lost a game in overtime. They're 3-5-2 in the last 10. They're a desperate team. They don't want to look like they're weak, so they're going to play as hard as they can, and the Sharks are going to have a lot to kind of overcome there. So on top of this early game, they're going to have a team that's a lot of experience, they have a lot of confidence. They're just kind of in a funk right now. So in terms of points, leading in points, Pasternak has the most points, 51 points in 47 games. He has 21 goals already. He's already on pace for about 40 goals this next season. Marchand is second place with 35 points in 47 games. He's a little bit long in the tooth, but he's still showing that he's capable of performing. And Pavel Zacha rounds out the top three with 26 points in 47 games. He's kind of like their undisputed first line center right now. Him and Lindholm are kind of, it's between those two, and Lindholm himself has 22 points in 47 games, but he's been kind of a disappointment for the Boston Bruins, considering he just signed that long 7-year contract for them. He hasn't really lived up to it so far. He's a -7. And in terms of the first defenseman, I could look, Lorelei, I can't even say his name, Lorelei, he's got 21 points in 42 games for the defense, leading the defense in points. McAvoy has 20 points in 45 games, and they're your 6th and 7th in points in terms of the Boston Bruins. This team, on paper, you look like they're beatable. Like, you could see that they're kind of falling down towards the standings. They're all those years of being very good and competitive have kind of caught up to them now. They do have a lot of star power, but it's just not consistent enough. If the Sharks are capable of shutting down their top lines, I can see the Sharks possibly winning this one. It's probably would have to be a defensive type of a game, though. Like, you're not going to be able to win this game in a route like 5-4. It's going to have to be a very good performance by, I'm assuming Georgiev's going to play just because of who's playing afterwards, but who the Sharks are going to play afterwards, I'm going to talk after this. But yeah, so I think if Georgiev plays in net, they're going to have to play very well defensively here, which is going to be very tough. The power play, another advantage that the Sharks have is that Boston's power play is garbage. So if they do, if it becomes a chippy game, the Sharks end up going to the box a couple times. They do have the advantage of knowing that Boston isn't going to really, put the pedal to the metal and trying to put their foot on San Jose's neck to knock them, to hold them down. But also in terms of penalty kill, the Sharks have a chance as well. Boston's 24th in terms of that. They're 75.7% on the penalty kill. And the Sharks, even though they're really bad in the power play, they do have a chance to maybe make something of it if they do have a chance to get a couple of power play advantages there. But yeah, in terms of the last 10 games, Boston did win a couple in their last 3, but overall they're 3-5-2 in their last 10. So the Sharks could do something, but the thing is that the Bruins beat Tampa Bay and Florida, who are good teams. So Boston still has that confidence. They still have that, swagger, knowing that they are capable of beating the good teams. It just looks like they had trouble with some of the bad teams. So they lost to overtime to the Islanders. Ottawa, who is in a playoff spot right now, but they lost them in overtime, a game they wish they had back, considering they're both fighting each other for the wild card spot. But yeah, so Boston, I would say it's probably going to be a loss just because it's an early game, and the fact that just Boston is that type of team that they do jump on the crappy teams a bit. So I feel like the Sharks are going to have it in for them. I just don't see them winning this game because it's so early, and they're still on that tiring road trip. And Tuesday night, so I'm going to say it's a loss for that one. So Tuesday night, the San Jose Sharks are going to be in Nashville in the first of a back-to-back. So Sharks will be playing in Nashville on Tuesday, and then on Thursday they're going to be actually at Nashville. So I'm going to break this down how they're both going to be. So in this one, I'm going to assume because they're in Nashville, I think that Askarov will get the start because it's Askarov's old team. It's something that typically a lot of teams like to do. Coaches will like to have their players that played for an old team to play, especially goalies, to play for that old team, just to kind of like get the whole team to rally around their player, to kind of say, we're here for you, and that player's also probably motivated to want to beat that team. So there's a lot of motivation going around. So I can see that's why the Sharks will probably play Askarov, at least for Tuesday, maybe even on Thursday, if Askarov's feeling better because he was sick yesterday. The Nashville Predators are having a horrible season. They're one of the team that seems to happen every year where they seem to have won the offseason. They got Stamkos, they got Marchessault, but nothing is going well for them. They're actually third from last in the Western Conference. The Sharks are second from last. So yeah, they're right back and back. They have 5 points ahead of the San Jose Sharks and 3 games in hand, so they could make something of this. But right now, they're having a disappointing season. They are actually on a 3-game win streak, so things could turn around for them real fast. They're 5-5-0 in the last 10, but still, like, their season just overall, it's been pretty terrible. So I don't know what Barry Trotz GM is going to do for them. If they can sell, he's already talking about selling some guys off in the trade deadline. Who knows? This team was supposed to be competing for a cup. People were thinking they could be in the cup final this year, just how good they were on paper. But unfortunately, they're very disappointing. So the top point scorers for the team, Philip Forsberg, who's been their hottest player for the last half a decade at least. He's got 15 goals, 27 assists, 42 points, almost a point a game in 45 games. Jonathan Marchessault, despite the fact that, this team's been disappointing with their signings, he's actually been pretty decent for the Nashville Predators. He's second place, 34 points in 45 games. He's got 14 goals and 20 assists. Roman Josi has 32 points in 41 games, so he's third place in points. And Steven Stamkos, another guy that people were kind of like to rib on the fact that he left Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay didn't want to re-sign him, and it makes them look like they're right now because it's just how bad Nashville's playing. But he's got 30 points in 45 games, which is okay, but he's got the most goals for the team. He's got 16 goals in 45 games. He's got about point per game, goal pace right now of 30 goals for the season. Not incredible, but based on his age, it's not terrible either. Ryan O'Reilly rounds out the top 5 with 27 points in 42 games. Another star center that Nashville desperately needs to kind of keep. I don't know why they're talking about trading him, because if you get rid of him and you get rid of Stamkos, the problem with Nashville is their lack of depth, their center depth. So if you get rid of Riley, who's probably your best center, you're kind of screwed. Because Stamkos stays more of a winger role. They shift him between back and forth and center like in Tampa Bay, but he's not a bona fide number 1 center, and your best players right now are Forsberg and Marchessault, who are wingers. So if you get rid of Riley and you don't get a center back, you're kind of screwing yourself over. But I don't know what they're going to do. We'll have to see what they do with that. But Riley is the top 5 in terms of points, and we have to go all the way down to the 7th place with Brady Shea to find another defenseman with a lot of points. He's 7th place in points with 14 points in 45 games. He's actually been the real disappointment out of all the acquisitions in the offseason. Marchessault and Steven Stamkos, they're expected to do a little bit better than they are, but Shea is actually being an offensive defenseman who plays decent defense as well. The fact he only has 14 points in 45 games is pretty disappointing. Overall, this whole team's been disappointing. But yeah, with Askarov, I think Askarov playing in Nashville, I want to say the Sharks may have this edge just because Askarov and the team will be playing and rallying behind Askarov to win, despite the fact that Nashville has won 5 games in the last 10 games. And they've beaten some pretty weak teams, so they might, and also even Vegas. They beat Vegas as well in the last 3 games. They're on a 3-game win streak. They could have this, swagger and confidence to kind of beat another bottom-feeding team. But I think the Sharks could upset them the way they upset Detroit. But on the flip side, on Thursday, when the Sharks go back home, I kind of have this thing. It's not more of really a numbers thing. Maybe I'll look into it later in the season. But I feel when the Sharks come back from a road trip, they kind of play flat at home, and I feel like that's what they're going to do after a long road trip. They're probably going to be home and wanting to rest a little bit more, and their minds may not be into it, especially if they do beat Nashville like I think they will. So I think Thursday night on the second of the home and home game against Nashville, I think they're going to lose. I think they're probably going to play Askarov again just because it is his former team. I can see the Sharks losing this one just because the Sharks are the Sharks and they have trouble scoring. I'm going to predict a loss there just because they're going to win 1 on Tuesday. And finally, Florida. So we're going to break this one down. The Stanley Cup champs, the team that the Sharks probably would have trouble with because the Florida Panthers, they're a complete team. They're everything the Sharks have a hard time playing against. But the Sharks do have a good record playing against some good teams. Sometimes they do show up against teams like that. But the Florida Panthers are a very, very good team. So it would be hard. They're hard pressed to kind of beat them. Florida themselves right now are kind of middling. They're not doing incredible. They are second place in their division right now with 57 points, just behind the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're only 2 wins behind as well. So they're in a nice spot. You don't want to be winning the President's Trophy because if you're have the most points, you're not typically the team that ends up winning the cup anyway. So Florida isn't trying to die to get to the best points in the season anyway. They're still looking very good. They'll have home ice advantage as second place in their division, so they're doing fairly well. A little bit cold right now. Like I said, they're 5-4-1, not crazy great. But in terms of everything else, they're pretty much rocking. They have a great power play. It's 8th in the league with 24.5%. Their penalty kill is not great. It's 17%, or 17th place, 78.8%. They're actually just below San Jose in terms of the penalty kill. So again, if this gets great like in Boston, because Florida does like to be, play a little bit dirtier, a little bit more intense, and the Sharks do end up getting a little bit take a little bit of liberties that get them in the box. They don't have to worry too much about burning themselves. They should be able to hold it off, but at the same time, when it comes to Florida, they're a powerhouse team, so they couldn't be asleep too much. But yeah, the Florida Panthers are a great team. Just looking at the points here, Sam Reinhart is leading the team in points. 51 points in 47 games. He's got 27 goals already. So he's on pace to have over 50 goals again. Another underrated guy that Buffalo wishes they didn't give away so easily. He's found his groove. He's got some confidence, especially after winning a cup, especially after scoring almost, I think he scored 60 goals last year. Or at least he was close to it. He had a hell of a season. And second place is Matthew Tkachuk. He's got 40 points in 42 games, almost a point a game. And what can you say about him? He is the attitude of this Florida Panthers. Florida has been a good team for almost about a decade now, you could say, maybe 7 years. And before they had Matthew Tkachuk, they were seen as a soft, high-scoring team, a lot like some other teams. I don't want to really put them under the mud, but they're kind of seem like as a joke, they can score a lot of goals. They'll get a lot of points in the regular season. They even won the President's Trophy, being this offensive flair with Huberdeau kind of leading the way. But they were nothing without that new identity that Tkachuk brings. So he's second place in points. He's got 40 points, 42 games. And yeah, but it's more that he brings in. Those intangibles, people like to say the word intangibles. It's the way he plays tough. He gets in other people's faces. He gets in the goalie's faces. He's not afraid to scare other players. He's an intimidating guy to play against, especially in this day and age. So just a huge valuable piece for the Florida Panthers. You got to watch out for him out there. And honestly, without Giovanni Smith to kind of keep things even, maybe Klim Kostin might be some guy, but there's no one that the Sharks have that can equal Matthew Tkachuk, who's he produces on the board, and he also has this mean streak that a lot of other players that puts them off their game, and also they're just intimidated by. And surprisingly, top three, Alexandar Barkov. Now, he did play 10 fewer games than Reinhart, so it is surprising that he's third place in points. He's got 38 points in 37 games, over a point a game as well, just not as good as Reinhart, but he's having a great season. He was injured a little bit earlier in the season, but he's doing very well as well. Number 4 is Carter Verhaeghe. He's got 32 points in 47 games, 10 goals, 22 assists. And to round out the top 5 is Anton Lundell. He's called Barkov Jr. as well. He plays a great defensive game, but he also can put up some points. He's got 30 points in 46 games. This team, I could just name all the players that just down this list. They're stacked with talent. They got Sam Bennett, they got Aaron Ekblad, who's got the most points for defenseman for the team, with 20 points in 41 games. I mean, Evan Rodriguez is a good depth guy. Gustav Forsling, another offensive defenseman who's been undersung hero there. This team is going to be very tough to beat. I'm going to predict another loss because it's just the Sharks. They're not good enough. This is a team that's been through it all. They've been to 2 cup finals in the last 2 years. They know what it takes to win. They know how to be mean. They know how to score goals. They do everything right. So I'm going to predict that Florida is going to also win this one. So the Sharks, my guess, they're going to finish this week 1-3. I know it sounds sad that I don't believe in this Sharks team, but just based off the performances we saw at the end of this week, I just don't think they're capable of winning a lot of these games against these really good, not even really good teams excuse me, against Boston, who's not on the borderline good, but they historically were good. It's gonna be hard to beat those guys. Nashville, I think they can at least split the home and home series and win in Nashville, because I think they're gonna rally for Askarov, the Sharks. And Florida is just the defending champs. So what can you say? I just don't think they're gonna be able of beating them. So I'm gonna think the Sharks are gonna be 1-3 this week, and they're gonna come away with 2 points. I would be happy to see that. If they get more, I'm even happier. But just being realistic here, the Sharks are probably going to get one of the 2 in Nashville. Boston's going to be a tough one just because of the time of day. Florida is the best team. Nashville is a bad team, but the Sharks don't seem to play up against bad teams some games. And these teams are all, like Randy Hahn said yesterday, they're all desperate teams looking to do something. Florida's not desperate, but they're just a really good team. But Boston wants to make the playoffs. And Nashville wants to make the playoffs, but at least not look as bad as they have been. So this is going to be a tough week for the Sharks, but at least they're going to end their road trip and get back home and at least sleep in their own beds, which makes a whole difference. So hopefully at least the Sharks will turn things around this week. Maybe I'll be completely wrong, which I would be happy to see. But that is it for the scheduled win-loss segment. And that is also it for the show. I want to appreciate you listening. If you managed to listen to the whole podcast, thank you for listening again. You can check me wherever you are. You listen to podcasts, obviously, or if you're listening to one here, stick to where you're listening to, obviously. I'm also on Instagram at Teal Teardown Hockey. I post just a couple of reels here and there. I had a nice little post about Vlasic just honoring his 1300th game. I like to talk about the keys to the game and what's upcoming for the Sharks, and just a couple of fun little pictures here and there. Also, I'm on X at Teal Teardown HKY. If you like the show, leave a like or a comment. It helps with the algorithm. And that is it for me today. I will see you all next week.